Ma'am, you need to leave the ICU. No. Preston, please. Look at me. Really look at me. You chose me. Every day, you chose me. You said love was enough. You said, Ma'am. The guard's hand touched her arm, gently but firmly. You need to come with us. Preston. Margot's voice broke completely as they pulled her toward the doors. Please remember. Please. I love you. We love each other. The ICU doors closed, cutting off her words. Through the small window, Margot watched Vivian lean over Preston's bed, stroking his hair, whispering things Margot couldn't hear. Watched Graham speaking with the lawyers. Watched her entire world being systematically erased, while Preston looked on with the blank confusion of someone who couldn't remember why any of this mattered. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. William Chronicles, where we tell stories that make you feel something real. This is the continuation of the beautiful tale of Margot and her love that cost everything. I recommend you to check out the first story so that you can follow along with this wonderful continuation. If you're ready for a beautiful yet devastating tale of true love, impossible odds, and what happens when choosing your heart costs everything, hit that subscribe button right now, slam the notification bell, and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. Margot Miller, no Margot Hayes, though that name felt like a cruel joke now, had learned that heartbreak wasn't a single moment. It was a slow erosion, a daily dying. 5 months since the ICU doors closed between them. 5 months since security guards had physically removed her, while Preston looked at her with the blank confusion of a stranger. 5 months of waking up in their apartment, her apartment now, reaching across the bed for a body that wasn't there. She'd stopped changing the sheets. They still smelled faintly of him, of the cheap body wash he'd used, of the life they'd tried to build from nothing. County General had become both her refuge and her prison. She worked triple shifts, took every extra hour offered, existed in the mechanical rhythm of other people's emergencies so she wouldn't have to face her own. Patricia watched her with worried eyes but said nothing. What was there to say? The legal consultations had been their own special torture. The first lawyer, Harrison and Associates, recommended by a co-worker, had listened to her story with sympathetic eyes and a practiced expression that told Margot the answer before he spoke. Mrs. Hayes, I understand your position, but the conservatorship was granted legally. Your husband suffered severe brain trauma. He couldn't remember you, couldn't consent to your presence. The court determined he needed someone to make medical decisions, and his family lied to him. Margot interrupted, her voice harder than she intended. They've been lying to him for 5 months, telling him I don't exist, that we were never married. Can you prove that? The question had landed like a physical blow. Could she prove what happened in private conversations between Preston and his family? Could she prove manipulation, gaslighting, the systematic erasure of their relationship? I have our marriage certificate, photos, text messages, witnesses, who, all of which proves you were married. It doesn't prove he wants to be married now. The lawyer had leaned forward, his tone gentling. Mrs. Hayes, even if we could challenge the conservatorship, and that's a significant if, there's another question you need to answer. Can you afford his continued care? Margot had felt the world tilt. What? Brain injury recovery is expensive. Specialized therapy, medications, monitoring, rehabilitation. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next year alone. Sacred Heart is providing that care. His family is paying for it. The lawyer's eyes held pity that made Margot want to scream. Even if you won custody, could you provide the same level of care? The silence had been answer enough. She'd consulted 7 more lawyers over the following months. Each conversation ended the same way. Sympathetic refusals, gentle explanations of reality, the unspoken truth that the Hayes family was untouchable. The last lawyer had been the most honest. Look, I'll level with you, he'd said, not unkindly. The Hayes family owns half the city. The judges who'd hear your case, they donate to campaigns the Hayes family funds. The doctors who'd testify, they work at hospitals with Hayes wings. I have a career, Mrs. Hayes. A family. I can't afford to make enemies of people that powerful. So I just lose him? I just let them erase me. I'm sorry. But yes, that's exactly what you do. Margot had walked out of that office into late afternoon sunshine that felt obscene, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she'd let herself think the thought she'd been avoiding. You knew this wouldn't work. You knew from the start. The voice in her head sounded like her mother, like every guidance counselor who tried to convince her that nursing school was reaching too high, like every person who'd ever looked at her neighborhood and decided she was worth less because of her zip code. People like, you don't marry people like him. Not really. Not permanently. The world doesn't work that way. She'd gone home and cried for 3 hours straight, ugly sobbing that left her gasping. And when she was done, something had shifted. The hope that had sustained her for 5 months cracked, and underneath was something that felt like acceptance, or resignation, or just exhaustion too profound to fight anymore. Preston was where he needed to be. He was getting care she couldn't provide. His family, for all their cruelty, had the resources to help him recover. And Margot? Margot was the poor nurse who'd almost gotten him killed with her poverty. Maybe his mother was right. Chapter 2. The Awakening. Preston Hayes woke up on a Tuesday morning and remembered everything. Not fragments. Not pieces. Everything. The memories hit him like a physical assault. A downloading of 5 months of missing data that his brain had been carefully reconstructing. He lay in his bed at Hayes Manor, the morning sun streaming through windows that looked out over manicured lawns, and saw a different room entirely. A cramped apartment. Margot beside him, her body warm against his. Both of them tangled in sheets that had seen better days. Her voice sleepy. What are you thinking about? His answer, that I've never been this happy in my life. Preston sat up, his heart racing. The memories kept coming, relentless, undeniable. Their first meeting in the ER. Her resistance. His persistence. Coffee at Brennan's Diner at 9 a.m. Her hands wrapped around a mug like it was armor. The courthouse wedding. Patricia and Frank as witnesses. Margot in her scrubs because they couldn't afford anything else. His vows, I choose you. Every day, against everything. Working at Morrison's warehouse. The blisters. The exhaustion. Coming home to find Margot waiting, her gentle hands cleaning his wounds. The way she'd looked at him, not with pity, but with respect. Like his sacrifice mattered. Making love in their narrow bed. The poetry he'd whisper against her skin. The way she'd cry sometimes afterwards, overwhelmed by the weight of being chosen so completely. The toothache. Ignoring it because they couldn't afford the dentist. The fever. The pain. Collapsing. And then nothing. Waking up to blank faces, a mother who called him darling but felt like ice. A brother who looked at him with calculation instead of concern. Preston's hands were shaking. 5 months. They'd kept him from Margot for 5 months. Fed him lies about confusion, about false memories, about a rebellious phase that nearly killed him. He looked around his childhood bedroom. The expensive furniture, the shelves full of books he'd been allowed to read but never discuss, the window that overlooked wealth he'd never earned, and felt nothing but rage. His mother had taken everything from him. Again. But this time he remembered. And this time he wasn't staying. Preston dressed quickly, his movements mechanical. He had no plan beyond getting to Margot, seeing her face, holding her, apologizing for 5 months of absence that wasn't his fault, but felt like abandonment anyway. He walked down the stairs of Hayes Manor, past the portraits of ancestors who'd built their fortune on other people's suffering, past the grandfather clock that marked time in a house where nothing real ever happened. Vivian was in the dining room, coffee and newspaper, the morning ritual of someone who'd never had to worry about rent or hunger or whether love was worth the cost. Preston. You're up early. I remember. His voice came out flat cold. Everything. Margot. Our marriage. The warehouse. The lies you've been feeding me for 5 months. His mother's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. Her expression didn't change. Years of practice at hiding emotion. But he saw the calculation in her eyes. You're still recovering, darling. Your memory is perfect. Preston moved closer. I remember choosing her over you. I remember why. And I remember that you took advantage of my injury to erase the best thing that ever happened to me. We saved your life." Vivian set down her cup with precise care. "That woman let you die from a toothache because she was too poor to afford proper care. We brought you home. We gave you the treatment you needed. We protected you from repeating a mistake that nearly killed you. She's my wife. She's a liability." Vivian's voice sharpened. "Preston, use your head. You're a Hayes. You have responsibilities, a legacy, a future that doesn't include living in poverty because of some romantic fantasy." "I'm going to her. Now." "And then what?" His mother stood, and Preston was reminded that she'd built an empire through sheer force of will. "You go back to that life? Working yourself to death for minimum wage? Ignoring infections because you can't afford doctors? How long before something else nearly kills you? How long before she's planning your funeral?" The words landed because they held truth. But Preston had learned something in that cramped apartment that he'd never known in this mansion. Poverty with love was still richer than wealth without it. "That's not your decision to make anymore." He walked out of Hayes Manor for the second time in his life, leaving his mother standing in that dining room, surrounded by luxury and alone with her certainty that money solved everything. It was only when he was in his car, his own car, keys found in a drawer where his family had stored his possessions like evidence, that Preston let himself feel the fear underneath his rage. What if Margot had moved on? What if 5 months without him had taught her the same lesson his family kept preaching, that their love wasn't worth the cost? What if he'd lost her permanently this time? Chapter 3. The Reunion That Breaks. Margot was making coffee when someone knocked on her apartment door at 6:47 a.m. She froze, mug in hand, because nobody knocked at 6:47 a.m. unless something was wrong. Her mind went immediately to the worst places. Mrs. Rodriguez had fallen. Patricia had been in an accident. The hospital was calling her in for an emergency. She opened the door and forgot how to breathe. Preston stood in the hallway, looking thinner than she remembered, dressed in expensive clothes that hung wrong on his frame, his storm gray eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Margot, her name, spoken in his voice after 5 months of silence, broke something fundamental in her chest. The mug slipped from her fingers, shattered on the floor, hot coffee splashing across her bare feet. She didn't feel it. "Preston." Her voice cracked. "How, your family?" "I remember." He stepped forward, hesitant, like approaching something fragile. "Everything. I remember us. I remember choosing you. I remember." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry. 5 months. They kept me from you for 5 months." Margot couldn't stop the sob that escaped. She launched herself at him, arms wrapping around his neck, and Preston caught her like he'd been waiting 5 months just for this moment. They held each other in her apartment doorway, both crying, both shaking, both trying to remember how to breathe with another person's heartbeat against their own. "I thought I lost you," Margot whispered against his neck. "I thought you were gone forever." "Never. God, Margot, never." Preston pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, thumbs wiping away tears that kept falling. "I tried so hard to remember. Every day, I felt like something was missing, like there was this hole in my life I couldn't explain. And then this morning, I woke up and everything came back." They moved inside, barely making it past the threshold before kissing desperately. 5 months of separation compressed into the urgent press of lips and hands and bodies, remembering each other. Margot tasted salt, his tears or hers impossible to tell, and felt Preston's hands shaking as they held her face like something precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Preston looked around the apartment with eyes that were seeing it properly for the first time in months. "Nothing's changed," he said softly. Margot followed his gaze. He was right. His poetry books still sat on the shelf. His cheap coffee mug, the one with the chip he'd always drunk from, still sat in the dish drainer. The couch where they'd spent countless hours reading to each other in the dark. "I couldn't," she admitted. "I couldn't change anything. It felt like erasing you." They sat on that couch, Margot curled into Preston's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them quiet for a long moment, just breathing. Just existing in the same space again. Tell me everything, Preston said finally. The last 5 months. What happened after they took me? So Margot told him. The lawyers who wouldn't help. The consultations that ended in gentle refusals. The slow realization that she was fighting a war she couldn't win. The nights alone in this apartment, wearing his old warehouse shirt, trying to remember what hope felt like. Preston's jaw tightened with each detail, his body rigid with anger. They'll pay for this, he said quietly. I promise you, Margot. They'll. Preston. She sat up, looked at him with eyes that held something he couldn't read. We need to talk. Something in her tone made his stomach drop. Okay. Margot stood up, moved away from the couch, created physical distance that felt ominous. She wrapped her arms around herself, and Preston recognized the defensive posture from their early days, when she'd been afraid to let him in. I've had 5 months to think, she began, her voice careful. 5 months to be honest about what we did, about the choices we made. We chose each other. We chose impulsively. She met his eyes. Preston, we were together for 3 months before you moved in. 3 months before you gave up everything. We didn't think about the reality. We didn't plan. We just, her voice cracked. We just loved each other and thought that would be enough. It is enough. It's not. The words came out sharper than intended. You almost died because I couldn't afford a dentist appointment. You were in a coma for 3 weeks because we chose love over practicality. That's not romantic, Preston. That's dangerous. Preston stood, moved toward her, but Margot held up a hand. Please, let me finish. She took a breath. I've been thinking about the future. About what happens if we try again. What happens when we want children? What kind of life can I give them? What happens the next time you get sick? Or I do? What happens when? We figure it out. Together. How? Margot's voice broke completely now. With what money? What resources? Preston, your family was right about one thing. I can't give you the care you need. I can't afford the life you deserve. I can't. She was crying now, the words coming between sobs. I can't watch you die because I'm too poor to save you. Margot, you need to go back. She said it firmly, even as tears streamed down her face. Go back to your family. Get the care you need. Live the life you were meant to live. I was meant to live with you. No. She shook her head violently. You were meant for more than warehouse shifts and crippling poverty and infections that nearly kill you. Your family can give you everything I can't. Security. Future. A life that makes sense. Preston felt panic rising in his chest. I don't want that life. I want you. And I love you enough to let you go. Margot's voice was steady now even through tears. Please, Preston, go back to them. Let me be the one who saves you this time, even if it means losing you. I'm not leaving you again. You have to. She moved to the door, opened it, a clear dismissal that felt like death. I should have listened to my head from the beginning. Should have known this wouldn't work. People from our worlds, they don't get happy endings together. Margot, please. Go. The word came out as a sob. Go back to your family before I change my mind. Before I'm selfish enough to keep you here and watch you suffer for it. Preston stood frozen, his mind refusing to process what was happening. She was sending him away. After everything. After 5 months of separation. After fighting to remember her. After choosing her over his entire family. She was sending him away. I love you, he said desperately. Doesn't that matter? It matters more than anything. Margot's smile was devastated. That's why I'm doing this. Because love means wanting what's best for you, even when it destroys me. Preston wanted to fight, wanted to argue, wanted to stay planted in this apartment and refused to leave until she changed her mind. But he saw the determination in her eyes, the decision already made, and understood that pushing now would only hurt them both. He moved to the door, stopped beside her, his hand reaching to touch her face one last time. She leaned into the touch, eyes closing, and for just a moment they stood there, close enough to kiss, far enough that it felt like continents between them. This isn't over, Preston said quietly. It has to be. He kissed her forehead, gentle and devastating, then walked out of the apartment. He made it to his car before the rage hit, white-hot and all-consuming. His family had done this. His family had poisoned even their reunion, had created a reality where Margot thought poverty was stronger than love, where she believed sending him away was mercy. Preston sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, and made a decision that felt like ice forming in his veins. He was going back to Hayes Manor, not as the prodigal son returning home defeated, but as a weapon aimed at the heart of everything they'd built. If they wanted him back, they'd get him back, but they wouldn't recognize what he'd become. Chapter 4. The Slow Burn. Preston returned to Hayes Manor that afternoon with a face his family had never seen. Blank, compliant. The perfect son they'd always wanted him to be. Vivian was in her study when he entered, and the flash of triumph in her eyes made his stomach turn. "Preston, I'm glad you came to your senses." "You were right," he said. "The lie's smooth as poison. I can't give Margot the life she deserves. It's better this way." If his mother suspected the truth, she didn't show it. Instead, she smiled, cold and satisfied, and Preston understood that she thought she'd won. She had no idea the war had just begun. He spent the next 3 months playing the perfect son, attended family dinners without complaint, smiled at business associates, let his mother parade him at charity galas like proof of her victory. And all the while, he studied. He rejoined Hayes Industries in a junior position, learned the systems, made himself useful enough that people stopped watching him closely. And he started digging. At night, alone in his room, Preston thought about Margot, about her face when she'd sent him away, about the defeat in her voice when she'd said, "People from our worlds don't get happy endings." He'd prove her wrong. But first, he had to dismantle the empire that had destroyed them. The evidence came together slowly, pieces of a puzzle that revealed the rot at Hayes Industries' core. Preston found it in old financial records, in emails his father thought were deleted, in conversations he overheard when people assumed he wasn't listening. Harold and Graham had been embezzling for years. Millions siphoned from company accounts into private investments. Books cooked to hide the theft. Investor reports falsified. Federal crimes that could dismantle everything. The company, the fortune, the Hayes name itself. Preston documented everything with the methodical precision of someone building a case. He copied files onto encrypted drives. He recorded conversations. He built an arsenal of evidence that could destroy his family completely. And every night, he dreamed of Margot and imagined burning it all down. Chapter 5. The Return. 3 months after Margot sent him away, Preston appeared at her apartment at midnight carrying a laptop bag and wearing an expression that made her heart stop. "We need to talk." Margot hadn't seen him in 93 days, hadn't heard his voice, hadn't let herself think about whether he was okay, whether he'd moved on, whether he hated her for pushing him away. Now he stood in her doorway looking dangerous, not physically, but in the way his eyes held something cold and determined. "Preston, what?" "I found something." He moved past her into the apartment without invitation. "Something that's going to change everything. But I need you to see it first." He opened the laptop, and for the next hour, Margot watched as Preston walked her through evidence of fraud, embezzlement, criminal conspiracy. Her hands covered her mouth as the scope became clear. Millions stolen, investors defrauded, crimes that could send Harold and Graham to federal prison. "This will destroy them," Preston said finally, his voice flat. "The company, the fortune, everything they built on the backs of people like you. I'm going to the SEC tomorrow. I'm going to burn it all down." Margot stared at him, seeing not the man she'd fallen in love with, but someone transformed by rage into something she didn't recognize. "Preston, no. They deserve it. After what they did to us. They're still your family. They kept me from you for 5 months." His voice cracked with fury. "They made you think you weren't enough. They poisoned everything we built. They deserve to lose it all." Margot took his hands, felt them trembling with anger. "And then what? You destroy your family name along with them? You become the whistleblower who brought down Hayes Industries? You think that gives us a future?" I don't care about the future. I care about justice. No. She squeezed his hands harder. You care about revenge. And revenge is going to consume you, Preston. It's going to turn you into someone I don't know. Someone I can't love. What else am I supposed to do? The question came out broken. Just let them win. Margot was quiet for a long moment, her mind working through possibilities. Then, slowly, an idea formed, one that made her heart race and her hands shake because it was dangerous and perfect and exactly what they needed. Don't destroy your family name, she said softly. Use it. Preston looked at her, confused. You have evidence that could ruin them completely. But evidence is also leverage. She met his eyes. What if instead of going to the SEC, you go to your family? Tell them you know everything. Tell them you'll go public, unless they give you what you want. What do I want? Power. Real power. Margot's voice grew stronger. Demand a position in the company, not junior management, but real authority. Chief Operations Officer. Board seat. Whatever gives you actual control. Then demand they publicly accept our marriage. No more hiding. No more pretending I don't exist. Preston was staring at her like she'd just rewritten reality. You'd be using their crimes to blackmail them into accepting you, Margot continued. Into accepting us. You wouldn't destroy the Hayes name. You'd reclaim it. Make it yours on your terms. And once you have power, you can change the company from the inside. Make it ethical. Make it matter. They'll fight me. Let them. You'll have the evidence. They'll have no choice. She cupped his face in her hands. Don't burn down the empire, Preston. Conquer it. Then use it to build the life we were supposed to have. Preston's eyes filled with tears. You're terrifying. I learned from the best. She kissed him softly. Now go tell your family that their golden boy just became their worst nightmare. Chapter 6. The Ultimatum. The Hayes family meeting happened 3 days later in the mansion's formal dining room, the same room where they'd once tried to buy Margot's exit for $250,000. Preston entered carrying a laptop and a flash drive, his expression calm in a way that made his mother's eyes narrow with suspicion. Preston, this is unexpected. Is it? He sat down at the table, not in his usual seat at the side, but at the head, where his father normally presided. I found something interesting while working at Hayes Industries. I thought the family should know. He opened the laptop, turned it so they could all see, and played the first video. Harold and Graham discussing offshore accounts, falsified reports, strategies for hiding embezzlement. Vivian's face went white. Graham stood up so fast his chair fell backwards. Where did you get that? Your email server. Turns out Dad uses Hayes 1947 as his password for everything. Not very secure. Preston's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. I have 3 years of evidence. Emails, videos, financial records. Everything I'd need to send you both to federal prison for about 15 years. Give or take. Harold found his voice, finally. Preston. Son. Whatever you think you know. I know you've stolen $47 million from Hayes Industries over the last decade. I know you've defrauded investors, falsified tax documents, and violated about 30 different federal statutes. Preston leaned back in his chair. I also know that if this goes public, Hayes Industries collapses. The family fortune evaporates. And you spend the next 15 years in federal prison. You destroy your own family? Vivian's voice was ice. You destroyed my marriage. I'd say we're even. Preston smiled, cold and perfect. But I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to negotiate. What do you want? Graham asked through clenched teeth. Chief Operations Officer. Board seat. Real authority to make decisions. And you will publicly acknowledge my marriage to Margot Miller. No more hiding. No more pretending she doesn't exist. She becomes a full member of this family. Respected, accepted, protected. You're blackmailing us. I'm offering you a choice. Accept my terms, or I take this to the SEC tomorrow and watch everything burn. Preston closed the laptop. You have 24 hours to decide. He stood up, walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Mother? If anything happens to me, or Margot, anything at all, These files automatically go to every major news outlet and federal agency in the country. So don't get creative. Preston left them sitting in that dining room, faces frozen in shock and rage, and felt lighter than he had in months. He'd just reclaimed his life. Now he just had to convince Margot to share it with him. Chapter 7: The New Beginning. 6 weeks later. The Hayes Industries boardroom felt different with Preston sitting at the head of the table. The Riverside project begins next month, Preston announced, sliding folders across polished wood. Affordable housing renovation, not demolition. Fair rent policies. Community investment. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Graham stared at his hands. Vivian's expression remained carefully neutral. She'd learned that fighting only made things worse. The door opened. Margot walked in wearing scrubs from her morning shift at County General, carrying coffee, completely unbothered by the expensive suits surrounding her. "Sorry I'm late." She kissed Preston's cheek and took the seat beside him, added specifically for her role as Community Health Director. "Mrs. Hayes," one board member nodded respectfully. "The board approved funding for your clinic proposal." Margot smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson." After the meeting, in the elevator alone, Preston pulled her close. "How does it feel, being part of the empire?" "Better now that we're changing it." She kissed him softly. "Together." "Every day," Preston whispered. "Against everything." "I finally believe it," Margot answered. 1 year later, Hayes Manor's gardens bloomed with white flowers, a stark contrast to their courthouse wedding a year and a half ago. Margot appeared in an elegant white dress, Mrs. Rodriguez walking beside her, both crying openly. Preston stood waiting, Graham beside him as best man. Their relationship rebuilt slowly over 12 months. "Hi," Margot whispered, reaching him. "Ready to do this with witnesses this time?" Preston took her trembling hands, his wedding band catching the light, the same simple gold band from their courthouse ceremony. "And without warehouse clothes," she smiled through tears. They renewed their vows before two families finally united. "I choose you," Preston said, voice thick with emotion. "Every single day. I chose you in that courthouse. I chose you through 5 months of separation. I choose you now and forever." "I choose you back," Margot answered. "Not because you're rich or powerful, but because you showed me that choosing love, even when it's hard, even when it costs everything, is always worth it." The kiss brought thunderous applause. Warehouse workers, county general nurses, Mrs. Rodriguez's entire building. 2 worlds finally celebrating together. At the reception, Vivian approached Margot privately. "I was wrong about you." The words clearly cost her. "I thought you'd destroy my son. But you saved him. I'm sorry for the 5 months we stole. For not seeing what Preston saw from the beginning." Margot's eyes filled. "I forgive you." Vivian pulled her into a brief hug. "Welcome to the family. Truly this time." As sunset painted everything gold, Preston found Margot watching their celebration. "What are you thinking?" He wrapped his arms around her. "That we survived. That our courthouse wedding was real. But this," she gestured at their families laughing together. "This is the celebration we deserved." "Ready for our second honeymoon?" "Where?" "Brennan's Diner. 9 a.m. Coffee and pie. Just like our first date." Margot laughed, bright and joyful. "Full circle. Perfect." They danced under emerging stars, two people who'd fought the world, who'd proven that love, when you choose it every single day, really does conquer all. And that's how love won, not easily, but completely. If this story moved you, smash that like button and subscribe to Mr. William Chronicles for more powerful tales. Drop a comment. Would you fight for love against impossible odds? Share this with someone who needs hope. I'll see you in the next story.